My name is Viktor Okunev, and I'm a developer evangelist with Samsung Electronics, and my hometown is Vancouver, British Columbia. So for me, it was a flight just down south. And today, my colleague Kavitha, she is from our Mountain View office. She'll be helping me to present this session. So today we're going to talk about Android experience with desktop environment and how to make your apps ready for that, and why would you even think about this. So there's a number of interesting questions we're going to talk about. And historically, this is what we do, especially today, to reward you for staying late. We're going to run the quiz at the end of the presentation. And we're going to put a DEX station as a prize for the quiz. It's basically whoever answers about a dozen of questions, whoever answers them faster and more accurately gets the DEX station. Now, my question to you guys, who actually knows what DEX station is? Okay, so, but for those who don't, we're actually gonna give you a little bit of insight into the contents of this box. So, why mobile desktop? Why are we even talking about this? Actually, if you look at this picture, it's a little visual pun, because that's my phone sitting on top of my desktop, and it took me a while to take that shot. But the main reason, I think, why we like our mobile phones so much is because of pretty much instant availability. The moment you need them, you just reach out to your pocket, and here it is, available to take your pictures, to guide you through the map, and do whatever you do with your phones. And it's instantly available. But when you write code, do you actually use your phone? Probably not, because most of the times we choose to an environment that gives us a bit more productivity than a little tiny screen with a soft keyboard where you can't really go wild, right? So we choose to use desktops or notebooks with the physical peripherals, with the physical keyboards and mice and trackpads, because it's just a bit more productive, actually a whole lot productive, especially if you use shortcuts, in Android Studio. So the question is it possible to marry the both worlds and get the instant availability and the productivity of a desktop? And there were attempts to do that, to achieve that in the past. Actually, about 3 years ago, I won an internal hackathon by putting together a custom Android launcher that would, stretch the Android screen to a big TV screen and enlarge the icons. But it wasn't really that useful, because back then there was no multi-window support for Android. So my apps, they looked like they did, I couldn't resize them, I couldn't maximize them. They were basically mobile apps deployed on a large screen. But thankfully, starting from about a year ago, that's when Android N became available, Android Nougat, Google has added a multi-window support to core Android API. And that made a huge difference. In fact, you can actually launch a multi-window mode on your Android phone without any additional gadgets. There's two flavors of multi-window support on Android. First one is called Freeform, and the other one is called Split Window. Now, my question to you guys, how many of you have actually used those modes on your mobile devices? About half. And I think it did improve certain things, but still something was lacking. We actually need to be really productive. We need to bring the multi-window experience to a large screen and have a true multi-window environment. And this is where the OEMs step in by, adding missing pieces of software and providing some hardware. And since we're from Samsung, today we're going to talk about our own product that enables a desktop experience, true desktop experience for Android. So this is what happens when you plug your phone into a DEC station, connect HDMI cable, and this is it, basically a multi-window environment, totally resizable windows, all your notifications work, and I actually put a little reminder to myself. What makes this desktop environment really unique is that it's actually integrated with telephony. Try to receive an SMS message to your notebook. That would be real tough, right? But here you actually have, you can actually use telephony to aid to your content creation, which is kind of cool. So I guess the best way, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a good demo is worth 1,000 pictures. So why don't we go ahead and experience a little bit of Android desktop. Fortunately, all I have to do for that is to press escape button, because I actually run this entire presentation from my work phone. It's not even a demo phone, so occasionally if we'll see some messages coming in, please don't read them because they're confidential. So that's my desktop environment. It's looks like any other desktop environment. You see, you have a taskbar, you have a list of apps, you have a taskbar with some of the apps that are already loaded. And first thing I'd like to do, I'm sorry, I'll have to kind of stay sideways because that's the only screen. I can't see anything on my phone because it goes dark when you plug it in. But first thing that we usually do when we start start our day at the office, we turn on the music and we start coding, or we start writing emails. But there's something usually going on the background. So let's put some kind of video on the background. And, these days pretty much every content is controversial, and except for kittens. Kittens are politically neutral. Everyone likes kittens. So let's just put them on the screen. The other thing I want to launch here is my programming environment, which is called AIDE, Android Integrated Development Environment. I think that's the abbreviation. Have anyone actually used AIDE? That's okay, about half. So the cool thing about this environment is that you can actually code and build and deploy your app right on this device. You don't have to connect your device with USB cable to your notebook. You can actually deploy it right here. So let's go ahead and so I put together a little application. It's basically like a memo pad that shows a few tricks that you may consider doing in your own apps. So let's go ahead and build that memo pad. Actually, I found that it works faster than my Android Studio. That's pretty much it. All I had to do is to compile and build and deploy. Now, the reason I actually put kittens on the screen is not because they're so awfully cute, but to show you an important point. Perhaps you remember when you play a video, YouTube video on your mobile device, the moment you overlap the YouTube app with something else, the video stops. Well, not so much here, because as you can see, it still plays. And it's not by coincidence. It's actually by a conscious decision by a developer who chose not to pause the app in an on-pause callback method, because they decided that perhaps in a multi-window environment, it's okay to continue playing the the video, or in your case it could be whatever you're continuously doing. So you may actually think about not pausing that. Okay, so let's minimize the kittens. So here's the little app that I put together. Right out of box, I can tell you that in a desktop environment, all our favorite shortcuts are supported. So I'll just stay sideways. Control C, Control V, Control A, Control X, Control V. So you don't have to do anything to take advantage of these shortcuts because it just works. This is edit view that I didn't alter in any way. It just works right out of the box. Now, in case if you have some different use cases than you can realize with just normal shortcuts, you can also add some custom shortcuts. For example, I chose to implement shortcut Control plus, Control minus, that that basically zooms in or zooms out. In addition to keyboard shortcuts, so immediately you start thinking in a desktop environment, you should probably take advantage of having physical peripherals at your disposal because gestures are pretty much gone. In fact, if in your app you require that your state that your app has to have a touch screen display, it won't even launch in a desktop mode because it is not a touch screen. Okay, so forget about the gestures and focus on keyboard and the mouse interaction. When it comes to the mouse interaction, you also get a bunch of standard behavior right out of the box. So all the shortcuts, all the keyboard shortcuts, they have their mouse counterparts in a pop-up menu, as well as you can add some customizable behavior. Let me show you something that's called immersive mode. So I can maximize my app and then ask for the immersive mode. As you can see, the rest of the UI is kind of gone, and we can only see the app, the activity view, and that's kind of useful for gaming applications. That's happening all the time. Okay, where's my app? See, that's this is the recent app view. Then something else I was going to show you. Let's see how drag and drop works in this environment. Let's drag and drop something from the browser to this little memo pad. That's an information about our session. Drag, drop here. Again, this is standard behavior. You don't have to write a single line of code to do that. But if you want to do something a bit more fancy, let's say if you want to drag and drop a textual file, then again, it's totally customizable. You can choose to do that. Let's open my files application, and I actually have a little textual file somewhere. Where is it? Documents. Okay. So I can go ahead and drag this file. First I have to select it, and then I can drop it. And so in this case, I'm basically opening a file. Let me actually show you the code where I'm doing this. All you have to do is, so this is my activity. All you have to do is put together on drag listener. And when a certain content is being dropped to your application, you can analyze the MIME type of the object. And if it's text plain, then you can kind of assume that it's probably a textual file and insert the contents of the file right where you need it. Just again to finish about the mouse behavior. As I already said, that we have standard behavior right out of box, but nothing stops you from customizing even a combination of mouse and keyboard interaction. Let me press Control button and use the zoom in mouse zoom wheel to zoom in, zoom out. So really, it's literally just a couple of lines of code, all based on core Android API. So one of the beauty of this desktop environment, it's not something proprietary. It's all based on core Android specs. So we're actually not creating any hard dependencies on any proprietary APIs. Okay, so at this point, since we don't have much time, I am going to show this guy, and that basically this person represents, I guess, the majority of developers who have a bunch of questions like, is this even relevant to my users? Can I just deploy my app and enjoy all these behavior for free because I have shortcuts, I have mouse behavior? Won't it just run by itself? Am I locking myself into some proprietary stuff? Or perhaps it's going to take an awful lot of effort to implement something cool. So some of these questions you have to answer yourself, of course, because especially when it comes to your users. But just to make a note, this is coming pretty quickly. Pretty quickly, that will become a mainstream technology. More and more vendors actually support the desktop mode. Okay. Some of these questions hopefully we'll answer today, and I'd like to invite Kavitha, and she'll walk you through a few tips that you may consider using in your apps.
Thank you, Victor. Hello, everyone. I'm Kavitha. I'm developer support engineer working at Samsung along with Victor. So let's try to get answer to some of these questions. Is it really necessary to make your application desktop compatible? Like Victor said, it's coming in the market. As you can see in this picture, these are all apps that are optimized for desktop experience. The app in the background is the PowerPoint, and obviously the one in the foreground is the Excel sheet. As you can see, it can be maximized, minimized, and it has a free-form view. User will be able to increase or decrease the width and height based on his wish. So this is how it will look if your app is not optimized for the desktop mode. As you can see, there is a lot of real estate display space that's been wasted. So it's not a good user experience. So if you want to take advantage of all the display size that is available in the external bigger display, it is a really good idea to make your application desktop compatible. So this is the same PowerPoint application that you see here, if it is compatible in the desktop mode, and the one if it's not compatible in the desktop mode. So some of the suggestions we give to optimize your application for the desktop user experience is to consider reducing multiple screens into one. So like you can, if it's a mobile device, you have a smaller display, then it makes sense to switch from screens to screens for better user experience. But since in the desktop mode we have a bigger screen, you can take advantage of the bigger screen and try to put all the information into one screen. So one good way to use is to use a navigation pane, just like the one that you see in the PowerPoint presentation. So that is one good example to use a navigation pane. And now, since you have more real estate area, more display space, you can take advantage of giving more in-depth information by using more text in your application, if at all if it is necessary. So in mobile, when your app runs in a mobile device, you will not be able to provide paragraph of text. It's not really user-friendly to read multiple lines in a mobile device. But since you are in a desktop mode now, you can provide your own alternative resources and have more in-depth, more text in your application, so you can explain your concept in more detail. So another good way is to consider using a menu bar. So it gives you a contextual information about all the functionality that is available in your application. So menu bar is one of the best tools that you can use in your application, that is to make your app compatible in the desktop mode. So it is actually, if your app is already compatible with your tablet mode, then it is most likely that it will really run better in the desktop mode as well. So as you can see, there were days where we used to develop applications only for a smaller screen for the mobile, and then came the tablet. So we started optimizing our apps for the tablet mode. We started having 2 fragments, master detail view, etc., to make use of the extra space that was available in the tablet mode. And now we have the Chromebooks and everything, so we are trying to make our application more compatible with the notebooks as well. And this is like the next step to make your app look better in a bigger screen. So if you connect your HDMI cable to a 65-inch TV, so you need to make sure that you provide alternative resources so that the system can take advantage of the high resolution and your app might look better. So another important thing to note when you optimize your app for the desktop experience is that you need to handle the arbitrary dimensions accordingly. As Victor showed you already, user will be able to increase the width and the height of your application to any size randomly. So at one point of time, your application might be in a landscape mode, then it can be changed to a portrait mode, it can be even a square format. And user will be able to even make it into a one vertical column, or it can be a horizontal strip. So you need to consider all these things and handle the dimensions, arbitrary dimensions accordingly, so that they adapt gracefully. That is another point that apart from providing alternative resources, these things are something that you need to consider. This is one example, like how if your dimensions are not handled properly, this is one of the example how it will look in your desktop mode. So it is something to keep in mind to avoid this kind of issues. So embrace peripheral devices. As Victor already showed you a demo, so the desktop mode comes up with the advantage of having peripheral devices like keyboard and mouse. So you should try to take advantage of the keyboard and mouse. So when it comes to a bigger screen, even if it's touch enabled, nobody is going to use touch gestures in a bigger screen. So it's better to make your app compatible with the physical keyboards. Come up with your own custom keyboard shortcuts, mouse shortcuts, etc. So out of the box, like Control A, Control S, copy, paste, all these keyboard shortcuts are already available in the desktop mode. And then you can create your own custom behavior like Control plus, Control minus, etc. And you can also add more complex keyboard shortcuts for drag and drop. And you can combine keyboard and mouse shortcuts together to come up with your own gestures. You can also use pop-up menus. So our suggestion is not use gestures, because sometimes if you have a finger touch enabled in your application, that may not even launch in a desktop mode, because it doesn't make sense in a bigger screen. Nobody's going to use pinch, zoom, and all those kind of touch gestures. So this is a new technology, but it doesn't mean that you have to put in a lot of effort to totally redesign your application to make your app desktop compatible. It is just as easy as you make your application compatible in your tablet mode. So if you have a master detail view, you have 2 fragments. If it runs fine in tablet mode, most likely it would run good in the desktop view as well. The things to keep in mind is use density independent pixels, which are nothing but we have been following these best practices that has been published in Android documents. So if you follow these best practices, your app should definitely run fine in the desktop mode as well. We need to provide alternative layouts because this is a bigger display. You need to keep in mind the resolution of the monitor that your application is going to be displayed. So please provide your resources and images, and if you want any text accordingly. Handle runtime configurations. So another important thing to keep in mind when you want to make your application desktop compatible is to handle the runtime configurations accordingly. So every time a user plugs in your mobile phone into the docking station and pulls out from the docking station, there are runtime configuration changes happening. For example, when you run your app in a mobile phone, it might be in a portrait mode. When he plugs it into the docking station, it will be automatically converted into a landscape mode. And not just that, every time the user uses the mouse to maximize your window or increase and decrease the width and height of your application, runtime configuration changes happen. So it's an important thing that you need to keep in mind to handle these runtime configurations accordingly. Be smart on on-parse. So Victor showed you an example of how you can be creative by using an on-parse. Since it is based on Android Nuggets multi-window functionality, there can be multiple applications that are running simultaneously at the same time. So if one application is at the back and if you want to launch another application on top of it, it doesn't mean that you need to stop that particular application. Example, if it's a video application, user will still be able to see it even if it's in the background. So you can make use of the on-parse in a smart way. So you can use configuration qualifiers like there is a qualifier called the text. I'm not sure how many you might have used it before, but this is a qualifier that you can use to provide alternative resources and layouts for the desktop mode. And the DPI that the desktop mode supports is MDPI. So make sure if your app is in the mobile phone, you support both XXHDPI as well as the MDPI. So yeah, this is the docking station. And the Samsung DeX also supports Samsung Knox. All the security features that comes along with it is supported in DeX mode as well. So the DeX station has two USB ports, one Ethernet port and one HDMI out port. The phones that are supported for Samsung DeX station is Galaxy S8, S8 Plus and Note 8, and we plan to support the upcoming flagship devices as well. Now handing over to Victor.
Thank you, Kavitha. So we'll have a Q&A session after we're done with the quiz, but just to answer some of the most common questions. Question number one, can I actually detect that within my app that I'm running in a desktop mode? Yes, there's a few ways you can do it. One is to receive a broadcast, and the other one is to query the configuration object. And you can reliably detect the desktop mode. How big is my launch window? So there's actually certain ways you can specify the dimensions of your window when it's going to be launched on a desktop. You can do it statically with a manifest or programmatically in your code. And another question that comes up all the time is, this is DeX station. As you can see, it's not plugged into your notebook. But the question is, if I want to debug, if I want to deploy my code from the notebook to this phone, do I have to unplug it, deploy the app, then plug it in to see how the app works in a desktop mode? It would be the case if ADB didn't support the deployment over Wi-Fi or Ethernet. So all you have to do is basically plug your phone once to the notebook, launch ADB, and ask your phone to listen on TCP/IP port 5555. Then After that, you can plug your phone back to the DEX station and ADB connect from your notebook to the mobile device. And from this point on, you can work with your mobile device as it was plugged in through the USB cable. And in case if you would like to explore and see some of the guidelines in written, you can always go, your number one resource, of course, is the official developer guide for Android, specifically the multi-window section, because it's all based on that. But if you want to see some of the practical tips how to optimize your app for desktop, you can consider visiting our Samsung developer portal, where you can actually see pretty much everything that we've talked about, plus copy and paste some of the code. And I think we're doing pretty good on time. So now it's time for the quiz. Really simple, and it's all based on a pretty nifty. That's how I show my desktop. It's a pretty nifty tool that's called Kahoot. And all you have to do is to use your device. Hold on. We want a long quiz. We want a classic version. So basically you need to go to kahoot.it and enter this PIN number. It's pretty much all, and then we'll give you some time to do that. With 4 players, you guys have pretty good chance to win the prize. Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's wait for another 15 seconds, and then we can start. All right, we have 8 players, and we have the DEX station to give away. How cool is that? Okay, guys, let's go ahead and start. 9 players. Pretty cool. What's the purpose of DEX? So you just need to hit the square of the appropriate color, I guess. Yeah, we are not trying to replace notebooks or desktop computers because they have their own use cases. We just want to extend evolutionary, just like the tablets extended user experience for mobile users. We want to extend it to a desktop. Excellent. Jared is at the top. What port the DEX station doesn't have? And again, it's not just the accuracy of the answer, it's also the speed. So FireWire is the right answer. HDMI port we do have, because that's how we connect the DEX station to the monitor. Okay, Jared is still at the top. To have resizable windows in desktop mode, your app needs to target Android SDK. Excellent. Okay, we have a change of leaders. To be able to resize the app, actually, the right answer is those folks who said do nothing if the target Android SDK is equals or more than 24. Technically, you're right, because if you look at the developer guide, it says that the apps that build with the newer SDK, you don't have to say anything about resizable windows. But as you can see, if you deploy a non-optimized app to a desktop, and that's what your user is going to do, there's a chance that your app is going to look kind of ugly. So what we've done to prevent that, we put a little safeguard, and we're asking you to actually explicitly declare your resizable activity as resizable. And hopefully you do that after you've done some testing on a desktop. It's just a little safeguard that perhaps we're going to remove in the future. Okay, again, change of leaders. If you explicitly declare required touchscreen in your app, what's going to happen? Yeah, so I already mentioned that if you explicitly state in your manifest that your app absolutely has to have a touch screen, then your app is not going to even open when you plug your phone in DeX. This answer is correct. It's not going to open at all. Suresh is still leading. In order to make your app DeX compatible, it is mandatory to Yes, very good. So you actually don't really have to do, you don't have to handle keyboard events or mouse events. You can just enjoy the out-of-box behavior. So the none of the above is the correct answer here. Change the letters again. The mouse wheel zoom works in DeX. Yeah, so basically that's not a standard behavior. You have to implement a listener that would zoom in, zoom out. It's a custom behavior. Russell is our new leader. The following keyboard shortcuts don't work off the shelf with DeX. Alt-Tab actually works. Control plus. Remember in my demo, I showed you how I did the custom zoom in, zoom out. Control plus, Control minus. That was a behavior that I actually had to implement. Okay. What density resource qualifier you should use in desktop mode? MDPI, that's in the desktop mode. Desk is the proper resource qualifier, but it's not a density, not a screen density qualifier. Okay, again, change of leaders, getting closer to the end. A runtime configuration change does not occur when you minimize your app window. Yeah, because when you minimize, you're actually not just showing anything, so the configuration change doesn't take place. And the last one related to Nox, something that Kavitha actually mentioned. Okay, so some of the features of Samsung Knox, and perhaps some of you actually know about Knox, some of those features, they affect the user interface. Like, for example, you can lock your phone into a single app. It's called kiosk mode. And so the features that affect UI, from Knox, they don't actually play well with the DeX. But all the security features of Knox, and that's what Knox is famous for, they do work with DeX as well. So we have our leader. Please come on stage. No? Please, can you introduce yourself quickly?
Hi, I'm Stian. I work at Cisco Spark. We've actually been working on this, so we have some support for it in our app.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And now I think we could, answer some questions if you do have questions. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for attending. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's kind of late. It's time to run home.